Hello, today's topic is range extension. And this is non-belting range extension because the next chapter is going to be focused on belting. It's important that we add pitches into our range, both low and high, so that we can sing music that's appropriate to our voice type. This needs to be done in a healthy way and over a period of time. I think it's important that you focus on range extension on days where you're in really good voice, and if your voice is tired or you're sick, it's probably best to avoid it that day. I think it's also important, particularly with high range extension, that you've really sorted your technique out first. You've learned how to support your sound, how to place your resonance, and that you've worked through your passaggio points. And if you're not sure what those are, you can go back to the previous chapters and learn about that. Sometimes we just focus on high range extension, but low range extension is very important as well. One thing that's particularly important in low range extension is making sure that the jaw is relaxed. We often get very tight here, and then the jaw tries to take over as we descend into our voice. But by letting the jaw drop, we can often add several more pitches into our range. Also, placing the sound into the mask in the low range is important. Low voices in particular can have a tendency to have the sound go back as they start descending because they want to sound darker, they want to sound like a baritone, they want to sound like a bass, so they want to sound like a mezzo. But you still have to have placement in your mask to be able to sing low. And that's what makes the voice project. If we start sending the sound backwards, we lose our sense of projection and we do other things to compensate for that. One thing we do particularly to compensate for that is to push the chin down. And you see that a lot with young baritones and with mezzos. And keeping the chin in a nice, steady, secure place and flipping the sound forward, we can often gain a lot of pitches into our low range. Let's try. Can you just, however you put your hand, we're just going to do ah, and don't let your mouth get any more closed than that. Alright, so ready, and go. Good, just on We get used to a certain type of support in the middle of our range, and we have a tendency to not support our low voice as much as our high voice. Doing exercise where you have to crescendo into your low range really helps you find that support and not just have the sound taper off, but actually grow into the low voice sound. Lip trills can be really helpful in the low range as well, because you know if your lips stop vibrating, that there's not enough air moving through. So continuing that idea with crescendos, you can do lip trills, but actually crescendo into the low part of the lip trill. And that really helps develop the support you need to be singing in the low part of your range. So you know why your lips stop buzzing?
Because I don't have enough air.
Right, you're not
Yeah.
sending enough air through. You're using a lot of air at the beginning,
Oh, and
and
then
then not as much at the end. So
Okay.
can you crescendo? So the loudest part of that is not the high note, but actually the end of the final note.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready, and As we get into the upper part of our range, moving through our upper passaggio points, there is a tendency for some singers for the chin to start elevating, which is opposite from the tendency in our low part of our range. So keeping the head again in a steady position is really helpful as you start ascending into your upper range. Otherwise, the larynx gets stuck, and then it puts a shelf on how high you can actually sing. Tongue position is very much involved in that as well. If your tongue starts pulling back, it gets the larynx stuck and it puts a shelf on how high you can sing. Doing tongue stretches as you get into the upper part of your range can be really helpful. Even sticking your tongue out as far as you can and holding it, make sure your hands are clean, holding your tongue while you're ascending into the upper part of your range, you can really feel when it's trying to pull back. And it might not be the prettiest sound that you make, but it really helps retraining your tongue to be in a forward position and helps you add notes into the upper part of your range.
Okay.
Ready? 1, 2, ready, Good. Can we try that one more time? And can we think of an all vowel this time? All. 2, ready, Yeah, wow. I think there are some commonalities in adding upper voice extensions in the male voice and the female voice. One of those in particular is approaching things from above and working down, and the other is from working things below and working up. If we only work in one direction, it's not going to be as effective, and we're not going to be able to make as many choices as we want to. Another commonality I find in adding upper range extension in the male voice and the female voice is getting the body involved. So not just standing still, but actually moving around, getting the arms involved, doing knee bends while you're singing. I remember those lessons where I was trying to add particular notes into my range. That pesky G, the A flat, the A. And my teacher would have me do full knee bends, and I just remember clearly when I could suddenly sing those notes. And it was that energy that my body helped to create the sound, and that was really, truly effective. Really good. Let's have you do something with your arms this time. Yes, good. Really nice. Good. We're gonna do one more. Really drop your jaw. Good. For male singers, I think it's important that you try to develop your falsetto so that you can get your larynx used to a low position, and develop your head voice. So 2 different things. Develop a light approach in your head voice, and then start, once you find that, start working on crescendos in your head voice and develop more strength in that. If we just try to bring up chest voice all the way up into the upper part of our range, that can be really tricky, it can be really tiring. I find plosive consonants particularly effective in developing upper range extension on descending exercises, whether they're descending octaves or descending arpeggios, getting that energy behind, say, a B, B, in the upper range, and it takes the weight out of the sound and it gives it the energy that it needs. For female voices, I find fricatives more effective in descending exercises, particularly descending octaves or descending arpeggios. So Fs or Vs, which already gets the sound moving and there's no pressure. I find that it relieves tension in female voice in the upper range. I also like to do ascending arpeggios with the female voice. And as we start getting higher, you can find if you're actually going to hook into the flageolet register or not. And like I said in previous videos, some women have flageolet registers and some don't. So as you're ascending into the upper part of your range doing these arpeggios, it's important that the jaw is dropped and relaxed, and that the tongue is forward. As you start getting really high, I imagine the back of the tongue moving forward with each upper note, creating the space that the sound needs and getting a nice high soft palate. Once you've hit an upper note especially that you've never hit before, that can be the most exciting thing, especially when it feels right, like you know you did it correctly. However, that doesn't mean that it's part of your usable range yet. This is going to take a period of time before your vocal folds get really used to stretching for that particular pitch. And it doesn't mean that you can sing it on every vowel. So once you've sung that note on a vowel that really works for you, morph into the next closest vowel. So say you did it on an A vowel. Let's try that then on an E vowel. Let's try it on an A vowel. Until you really feel comfortable with that, and then sing through the whole vowel series and make sure that you can actually do that. Obviously, if you're singing super high, you're going to be able to modify the vowel a little bit, but finding which modification is going to work best for you and still sound like it's in the right vowel family. Something else you want to do to really secure that note as part of your range is to be able to sing at various dynamic levels. So you might be able to sing that pitch at a double forte and it feels great. But if you had to sing that pitch in a concert as a double piano, would you be able to do that? So practicing messa di voce, I've mentioned this in several videos now, where you're crescendoing, decrescendoing, crescendoing, decrescendoing. See how soft you can get and keep the sound spinning. And that's a good way to help develop that pitch and make it part of your range. If you're working on range extension in a lesson or practicing, it can be really helpful to video yourself on those particular moments. Because sometimes, you hit that note and then you struggle to do that again. And you can see how you got there in the lesson or in the practicing and what you did to actually do that. You can also see yourself, and if there is notable tension in your face or in your body as you're approaching the upper part of your range. So if you're going like this, you can fix that. A good fix for that, by the way, is putting Scotch tape on your forehead, and you can immediately feel when your forehead starts to tense up. As I mentioned, the next chapter is going to be on belting. So when we're doing non-belting range extension, if we're doing an ascending exercise, and this goes for male and female singers, that we don't try to bring the weight of chest voice up too high, because that also puts a shelf on how high you're going to be able to sing. So allowing the head voice to come into that somewhere in the ascending exercise, and that's going to make that ascent into the upper range much easier and more successful. Another approach I found really successful in developing the upper range of female voices is approaching it like you're sighing. So just a very light, open throat approach and sighing down and taking the weight out of the voice. And then once you've found that feeling, hold that top note just a little bit longer before you descend. And then hold it a little bit longer. And it's about adding endurance over a period of time and not trying to just suddenly sing high notes, but a light approach can be really helpful. Finally, for male and female singers, it can be really helpful to be aware of the sensations in your body when you're getting into the lowest part of your range and the highest part of your range. So do you feel sensations here? Do you feel it in your mask more, or in your mouth, in the front of your head, the top of your head, the back of your head? And just being aware of these sensations can be really helpful as you negotiate getting particularly low or particularly high in your range. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and stay tuned for the next chapter on belting.